How often do you see, I know Chris Palmer noted that a fairly high uh, coincidence or, association between poor metabolic health, whether it's metabolic syndrome, diabetes, prediabetes, and a whole host of mental disorders. Is that the same thing you're seeing?
Oh, I would say so, yeah. I mean, metabolic health is pretty appalling when you look around just the general population. So, I mean, I don't know how many times I've been in people's homes doing home visits, because that's what we tend to do in my job. And there's just packets of crisps or chips lying around and bags of sweets and or people are living on takeaways. And that's just the patients I see. The hospital staff that I work with is an entirely other manner. So yeah, there's usually junk food lying around in the office. And most of my colleagues, when I look around, have less than ideal diets. I would say that's my opinion. I don't voice it to them directly, but that's my take on it.
Yeah, I don't see the medical profession as a role model for how to eat. When I was in the hospital, there was an enormous number of hospital employees that were obese, that were nurses or some physicians. I mean, it was quite unfortunate. I understand you have a book out now on this topic, and I think it's called Metabolic Madness is what you've got out there. Can you tell us a little bit about that book?
Yeah, sure. I just really wanted to write something that kept things fairly straightforward. And it was really all the stuff that I wanted to tell patients that I don't always get the opportunity to do so. So it was partly for my own CPD as well, just it helps me to get things down on paper. And I ended up just writing a book to try and cover some of the evidence that's out there linking metabolic health to mental health outcomes, and then talk a bit about the different diet strategies that people could adopt. Because I think there is some variation. So I don't know that absolutely everyone needs to be carnivore 100%. Because I know of people who do well on keto, and some other people where it's been just particular foods they've ended up having to cut out, even if they've gone paleo or close to keto. And sometimes food intolerances can be an issue too.
Yeah,
I just really wanted to write something that would be a fairly straightforward read for people. And actually, there's a few of my nursing colleagues who've been reading it, so that's nice to get some of their feedback.
yeah, there is. I 100% agree. Not everybody needs to be on a carnivore diet. It has been helpful for many, many people, and some people choose to remain on that. I've chosen to remain on that just because I feel better that way. But I think it's not necessary for many people. Although there's some people where it just seems to be the right answer. Do you find that there is I don't know? Can we say, are there problematic type foods that seem to exacerbate mental health illness? Is it sugar? Is it processed, refined junk food stuff? Is it, I don't know, is it too much fat? Is it what do you think you're seeing?
So I would say it's sugar, processed foods, and seed oils. And often they all go hand in hand, don't they? There's not much processed food on the shelves that you can look at that doesn't contain fairly inflammatory seed oils with their very bad omega-6 to omega-3 ratio. But I don't know. Food addiction is another interest of mine. I think from a personal health journey, as well as anything else, and I see a lot. I see a lot of it around me. Patients and colleagues alike. So I think there are issues on all counts, but I don't think it's to do with fat, unless you're talking about seed oils specifically.
When a patient is admitted for whatever, a psychotic episode or something where they can't be safely managed outpatient, what is the diet they're typically given? Is there any consideration to diet? I mean, if they have allergies or maybe they're diabetic, but is it just kind of junk food, or what do they typically get in the hospital?
Yeah, so I feel quite blessed that I don't actually work in the inpatient unit. But from what I know, people fill out questionnaires when they come into the ward, and there are certain options, such as halal foods or vegan, vegetarian options. From what I do see, though, of menus that get emailed around the mass distribution lists in the hospital, it's mostly junk. So it's mostly carbohydrate focused, grain-based foods, desserts. There were emails flying around at work just last week or the week before, where the kitchen had put out that they'd had to have a last-minute menu change. and it was, I don't know, sponge pudding had been substituted with trifle, or, those are the kind of examples. And then the staff canteen at work, I just never go to, but the menu there is just as bad. It's all paninis, chips, kind of fish and chips, battered foods, grain-based options, all very carbohydrate focused.
And I haven't heard the word trifle in a long time as dessert. My mother used to make that. She was, basically she was South African, and they had that influence in there, and so I hadn't thought about that in a long, long time. So. Mom, if you're listening, it's interesting. You mentioned vegetarian, vegan options, and there is data. A number of studies now have shown a relationship between plant-based diet and mental health disorders, and whether it is a result of or those people tend to choose that particular dietary lifestyle. Any experience of your own which would corroborate or refute that observation?
I haven't done an audit, for example, of specific patients that I've seen. I don't have a clear sense that I'm seeing more people who are vegan or vegetarian who then have mental health problems, but I am aware of the association and the research. I tend to tell people when I have the opportunity that I don't think that's the ideal diet in terms of their mental health. I have some personal experience of that myself because I was vegan for a relatively short time and quite a number of years ago now. That was probably it was the worst health decision I think I've ever made.
Why do you say that? Why was it the worst health decision you'd made? Was there a problem with it?
For several reasons. So first of all, the only time I've ever had flu in my life was when I was vegan. So I was vegan for 18 months, and that was about 11 or so years ago now, something like that. I was really ill with the flu back then, and quite considerably younger than I am now. Since going carnivore, I just don't get sick anymore with anything really. Okay. That's been 3 years now. So that's been very eye-opening for me. I think from a body composition point of view, when I was vegan, things weren't good. So I remember feeling as though I was putting on weight and losing muscle, and just I didn't put on a huge amount of weight, but just felt the muscle definition wasn't there, and just felt kind of soft. And I was aware that I had body composition changes that weren't healthy. And then from a satiety point of view, that was the other thing for me. So I just felt hungry all the time.
Yeah, I didn't realize you were doing a carnivore diet. So it's interesting, and maybe I'll chat about that a little bit. But I want to ask you. There was a recent paper came out looking at serotonin. I'm sure you saw that, where they saw that the thought was that an imbalance in serotonin levels, and that was a justification for the SSRIs, which are incredibly widely distributed and prescribed times 20 or 30 years now. What do there people say, well, maybe it's not because of a serotonin imbalance, but these drugs still may have some efficacy. And you mentioned inflammation. What do you think is going on? And I know it's still speculative because I don't think we really know. What do you think is going on physiologically with some mental health disorders? I don't think you can put them all in one basket, but do you have any thoughts on what might be going on physiologically?
Yeah, just putting antidepressants to one side. Do you mean?
Well, I mean, as far as, like I said, there's theories on what causes mental health disorders. Is it a profound trauma? Is there some sort of neurological or neurotransmitter imbalance? Some people think it's inflammation. Some think it's a nutrient deficiency. I don't know. I'm just trying to see if you have any perspective on that.
Yeah. So there's a lot of evidence that it's metabolic dysfunction in terms of insulin resistance. So most, if not all, mental health disorders are higher rates of insulin resistance, and that's even controlling for medications that cause insulin resistance in their own right. Kind of repeatedly spiking your blood sugar levels, we know causes inflammation. So I do think of all mental health disorders as inflammatory disorders fundamentally. I think gut health is really huge when it comes to mental health. And I think there's a lot of research yet to be done there, but that's a particular area of interest of mine. Probably from a functional medicine training point of view, because we know that neurotransmitters all originate in the gut. It's the bacteria in your gut that produce these things. They produce various neuropeptide chemicals. There's a clear connection between the gut and the brain in terms of the gut-brain axis that some people refer to, with both physical connections the vagus nerve, kind of neurological connections, but also the more chemical signaling that goes on. And that's bidirectional, so that goes from brain to gut and vice versa.